The idea is like, can we find a faster way to pull carbon from the atmosphere from something that grows 10 times faster than trees? It was a crazy, every probably startup founder stories is they always think it's crazy. And in that moment, I was thinking, here I am trying to build the greenest, most sustainable furniture company I can and do these other things, great design, attainable pricing, go to direct to customer. But how can it be that the greenest material available to me is still cutting down trees? Elon Musk at the time was already talking about carbon removal. How do you take carbon out of the atmosphere? And already talking about the physics of the fact that there's just not enough physical land to plant enough trees to actually do that at enough scale to actually make a dent in climate change.
You literally are like, okay, I'm going to partner with somebody, and you pick a rocket scientist.
Literally.
Yeah. If you want to build a business, perfect business, partner with a rocket scientist.
You will see stocks that will hit 30 feet tall, but you will see consistently fields that can be 15 to 20 feet, sometimes higher, where it's amazing.
It's like a Stephen King movie.
Like a Stephen King movie. We were introduced through a venture capitalist to some folks at D.R. Horton, so the largest home builder in America. And then 20 minutes later, as we're presenting to them, we hand them a pressed board. And again, this was during COVID. And they're looking at each other and they're saying, wait a second, these knuckleheads did this in 20 minutes and put this in our hands, and we can't get panels from the biggest suppliers in the country right now?
Walk us through the challenges. Just because you get a seed round doesn't mean you can take the ball over the finish line. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can control things like inventory and orders and burn rate and expansion. What were the early days like? Someone
once said to me, who I respect and who works in startups, is now an investor. And he said to me, he's like, the challenge and the excitement about startups is that...
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Josh, thanks so much for coming on the pod today.
Thank you, Garrett. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to start us off with this statement. See what you have to say about it. If your climate pitch needs guilt to close the deal, your business model is broken. Real buyers pay for cost, speed, and reliability. The carbon win is actually the byproduct. What would you say about that statement?
I would say that is spot on.
Okay. You got to give me more. The audience wants more from Josh. No, in all seriousness, that is trying to maybe stimulate some conversation here, but we're talking about climate change here on this podcast, but obviously investing and trying to marry the two. I think you have said that most companies, climate companies, kind of sell the promise rather than the product. What is a product really in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's certainly it is doing what you just said. I think probably the most concretely way I can talk about is a company that I started and just came back in as the chief marketing officer to help grow. It's a company called Planted, where we make building materials out of fast growing grass instead of trees. The idea is like, can we find a faster way to pull carbon from the atmosphere from something that grows 10 times faster than trees? We harvest it every year instead of 20 years, right? And then we take that biomass, it's really strong, slice it, press it, turn it into a 4x8 panel that you build a house with, and put it on a home. And now the largest home builder in America, D.R. Horton, is our biggest customer and ordered 100 million of these panels, 10 million of these panels. 10 million of these panels. So why? Why would they do that? They certainly didn't do it because they are
responsible.
No,
morally.
No. I'm trying to find the right way to say it. They didn't place the order to save the planet, right? Like when you talk
right.
though, right? But when you talk with their head of purchasing, who oversees a massive budget, yeah, is he excited about the fact that we don't cut down trees and they don't have to cut down trees to build big parts of their home? No, of course, but he's not going to buy the product, right? Because of that, D.R. Horton is one of the leanest, meanest, best run housing companies in the world, right? So their whole organization basically they're building houses like just in time inventory, and everything has to be at the right spot at the right time and installed in the right way. And so we have to be at the right price. We have to be a drop-in replacement for what they build with today. We have to make it so easy to actually move toward this product, and we have to delight them based on the needs of how they run their business, not on how they care about the planet. Now, when we do that well, they love it, and everyone's thrilled to talk about how much good we're doing for the planet. But that comes after you actually the climate tech company or the sustainability driven company solves the core pain and need of the customer to actually get the sale. And so that's the difference. You really have to, founders who build these kinds of companies like me, who are building these climate tech sustainability companies, completely motivated to change the world. Probably also to make a lot of money, but definitely to save the planet, say it however you want. But the best ones realize that the only way to achieve any of that goal is to put a product in market that customers purely love on what it does for solving their immediate pressing business needs.
So to put a cliche on it, a true win-win, right? Like there aren't too many that you can say that in the business world, but this really does sound like it. So fast growing grass, you're talking about panels. The first thing that popped into my mind when you said construction panels is OSB, oriented strand board. Is that similar? Although that is made of wood chips, right? So trees, basically.
That's the precise product that our first product replaces. Yeah, so we are an OSB replacement, wall sheathing, roofing, and eventually flooring as we're now coming to market with this innovation.
Amazing. Take me back. I mean, the Planted's origins, who had the idea? Did you get inspiration from the tech? I'm fascinated.
Yeah, it was a crazy, every probably startup founder stories is, they always think it's crazy. They always think it's unique, right? So
Disruptors, right?
Yeah. And there's always, of course, a lot of parallels. But for me, I was living at the time in Western North Carolina. I had started a sustainable furniture company. We were manufacturing furniture. I wanted to bring furniture manufacturing back to the Carolinas, back to America, using responsibly harvested wood, this Forest Stewardship Council, so FSC certified plywood, beautiful, very high quality. And the pandemic hit, so right around 2021. Our sales spiked because we had desks and things that people were wanting to put into their homes right as we were in that moment for furnishing home offices. And then the business came to a halt because I couldn't prototype products. Our factory was struggling to stay open, et cetera, et cetera. I kept thinking about that material. And in that moment, I was thinking, here I am trying to build the greenest, most sustainable furniture company I can. And do these other things, great design, attainable pricing, go to direct to customer, take out the wholesale, middleman, all these things to make it accessible. But how can it be that the greenest material available to me is still cutting down trees? How can that be the greenest possible thing we can do? And while I was, wrestling with that, someone I knew in the Carolinas was like, hey, there's this guy down on the other side of the state, Raleigh-Durham. You should talk to him. He's got a little, manufacturing company. So me and this guy get on the phone, Wada Tan. And, we start talking, I start complaining about materials and he's like, well, what would you do? I'm like, I don't know, bamboo, hemp, there's gotta be something. I don't even know. And he's like, oh, I got 6 trash bags of hemp in my garage. And I was like, wait, what? You have 6, who does that? What are you talking about? And I'm like, who are you? He's like, I just moved here. I spent 8 years at SpaceX. I was leading the team that kept astronauts alive on the Dragon Crew spacecraft. I was in charge of life support systems. So immediately before anything else, I was like, okay, look, here's what we need to do. I'm going to shut my company. I think you should shut your company. Let's go start a materials company. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, Jesus, this is probably the smartest person in North Carolina now, right? We have to do something together. And Elon Musk at the time was already talking about carbon removal. How do you take carbon out of the atmosphere? And already talking about the physics of the fact that there's just not enough physical land to plant enough trees to actually do that at enough scale to actually make a dent in climate change, despite what most people want to believe about why, we should plant more trees. Yes. But when you think about it at a magnitude and scale, the math doesn't pencil to actually really make a dent in climate. So we had to think of something that works 10 times faster. So we came up with a way to do that. And that's how we got started.
I'm laughing to myself here. Those of you who are on Spotify and Apple, you should go to the YouTube because we're taking tons of notes. So you literally are like, okay, I'm going to partner with somebody and you pick a rocket scientist, basically.
Literally.
Perfect. Yeah. If you want to build a business, perfect business, partner with a rocket scientist. Everybody write that down. Amazing. Okay. So, what did he do with the hemp?
Well, what did we do with that? Well,
beside the obvious question.
We did have do we have a garage? Geez, we had a garage. We actually had a garage. So it was the early on, it was the three of us. It was me, Wada. We had one employee, and then Nathan, our current CEO, another SpaceXer, very quickly moved east from LA, left SpaceX, moved east, and joined us. Our Christian, our first employee, is a bodybuilder. And so he had all of these, of course, weights in the gym. And so we wanted to make our first press, right? What you have to do is you have to take hemp, you have to take any biomass, you kind of slice it, right? Put a little bit of resin or glue on it, and then you compress it to try and get to some sort of panel, right? Some sort of engineered thing. So the first ones we made, which actually looked more like bird's nests, we were using Christian's dumbbells to try and apply the weight, right? To just see what would happen. But that's what we started doing. We started taking small batches of hemp, small batches of bamboo, small batches of, you name it, waste, rice husks, any biomass we could find that we thought might do the trick, and test it, measure, test, see what results we get. Tiny little presses. I mean, really pressing things like this, material samples the size of a coaster. Eventually the presses got a little bigger, everything got a little bigger, but it was so exciting about that moment early on, when we really felt like the idea was right, that the housing industry would be interested for a whole bunch of reasons, which kind of go back to your first question to me. Why would the housing industry be interested? But so we incorporate, I'm starting to reach out to investors. We're trying to figure out, can we raise some early money? Of course, that's its own challenge. But in the meantime, we opened a little prototype shop in Durham, North Carolina, the cheapest space you can find, because SpaceXers are like the cheapest people on the planet. And WADA built a mixer, right? Because when you get the grass, or you get which we use today, or hemp or bamboo, you slice it, you got to throw it in a mixer with a little bit of resin, spin it so it all kind of goes on consistently. He built the mixer out of a used treadmill off of Craigslist that he bought for like $100, and a 50-gallon pickle barrel that he bought for like $40, bolted the whole thing together. And investors would show up and be like, okay, SpaceX, where's the shiny stuff? And then they'd see that. And at first you'd see the disappointment, and then you'd see the excitement, because they were like, oh my God, I want to give this person all my money because he is going to be the best steward of my capital.
Innovators. Yeah. Innovators. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay. So much to unpack. So you're going from here. Where did you discover that it was going to be grass that you would use?
So in that moment, this is 2021. I mean, we're going as fast as we can, prototyping these little machines.
Which isn't that long ago, by the way. I mean, it's not,
right? It's 5 years. It's not even 5. It's not even 5 years. And I mean, of course, though, in startup land, it's like dog years, right? So feels like half my life, but not that long ago. We were putting the word out, going to meet with professors from NC State who had fields where they were growing hemp crops in North Carolina, getting to know the Department of Ag in North Carolina and elsewhere. And through those connections, we were introduced, actually through the Department of Ag, to a number of perennial grasses that the North Carolina Department of Ag had been testing as a potential replacement for corn ethanol.
Okay.
And so there are these, but none of that worked. But we talked, this like great guy, Sam Brake, this genius, good old boy who was kind of at the twilight of his career working for the North Carolina Department of Ag. And he was like, we tried all this stuff. I said to the boys, just leave half an acre of this grass. Maybe someday someone will call. And we're talking about grass that's like 20 feet tall, really strong, thinner than bamboo, so you can mechanically harvest it. And he's like, maybe someday someone will call. I'm like, Sam, this is the call. And he's like, I think it might be. Why don't you come down to, this field 2.5 hours out in the middle of nowhere, and you can, bring a machete, chop some down, and see what you think. And so that's how we found it. And the Department of Ag, North Carolina, has been an incredible partner for us.
What a story. What a story. So the grass itself is engineered. Obviously, I have grass. I'm up here in Canada, so I'm looking out my window. We've got 3 feet of snow from our daily blizzard, but I've been in North Carolina and been in Durham. So how tall does the grass grow? And obviously genetically engineered that way because it was supposed to be for harvesting. For us, it's kind of like a controlled weed. I hate cutting it, right? I wish it would grow slower.
So we don't engineer the grass, but we do have a proprietary strain of this grass that we've been developing that we tissue culture.
All right.
So we are vertically integrated on the agricultural side. Now we have our own tissue culture lab, our own commercial greenhouses. We get the plants, and then we bring those plants to farmers. And our farmers, at least our initial farmers here in North Carolina, are tobacco farmers that are converting out of this age-old crop that has a limited future history, right?
Yep.
Or limited future into our kind of 21st century climate crop. So it will grow. I mean, you know, you will, you will see stalks that will hit 30 feet tall, but you will see consistently, fields that can be 15 to 20 feet, sometimes higher. Where
Wow.
it's amazing.
It's like a
And
Stephen King movie.
like a Stephen King movie, but imagine you know, when the pilgrims were here, right? And there was maize, and like maize it's not like commercial farming is today where everything is uniform and it's the same height and like fields forever, right? Like that takes time to actually domesticate and get a crop to actually look that way. So we're standing up a new ag supply chain for this crop that doesn't exist in the United States. So the fields, when you start to see a couple hundred acres of it, I mean, it just does take your breath away. But it's just at that kind of early stage in sort of this revolutionary thing that we're doing.
Okay, so you try the product. Tell us how you started ramping up for proof of concept and things like that.
Yeah, so we ended up raising the end of 21 a $2 million seed round, and kind of on the tail end of that round, we were introduced through a venture capitalist to some folks at D.R. Horton, so the largest home builder in America, and to their venture investment arm. And D.R. Horton came out for a visit. By that point, so we're about 8 months into this venture, we have very small scale machines, but like I said, we have a mixer, we have a slightly more advanced press. We have the tooling to be able to bring someone into our, again, really, really crappy prototype shop, that's like really cold. I don't remember if it had heat, but you're bringing these like execs, from D.R. Horton, and they're able to sit there and we're presenting to them. They see us slice the grass. They see us apply resin to the grass. They see us press the grass. And then 20 minutes later, as we're presenting to them, we hand them a pressed board. And again, this was during COVID. And they're looking at each other and they're saying, wait a second, these knuckleheads like did this in 20 minutes and put this in our hands, and we can't get panels from the biggest suppliers in the country right now, right? If you remember like the crisis that supply chains were in. It was so eye-opening for them because I think the realization went in two directions. One was, we had other samples to show them of swelling test and saying, here's OSB, as you pointed out, Garrett, like here's what you use today in our submersion swelling test. And you can see how OSB swells when it gets wet, which is obviously not good for structural integrity. Here's our sample, right? And it hardly any swelling, maybe zero swelling. And it was eye-opening from a quality standpoint.
Now, why is that? Sorry to interrupt. Why does it not swell?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, but the primary reason is because of the biomass we can use. Like you mentioned with oriented strand board, you chip wood and then you press it together. It's not uniform, right? There's a lot of pockets of air in there. You're trying to fill it with resin, which means you're also filling with a bunch of crap, but you don't fill it you can't necessarily fill it all the way. And there's air pockets in there, right? There's ways that moisture can get in. We slice our grass, like these are all machines that we built. I can't even tell you the exact number, but at least an order of magnitude thinner, which means we can compress far more fiber using the same amount of resin, which means there's just far fewer places for moisture even to get into that panel in the first place. It's just, it's a different physical, the chemistry is just different of how we approach it. So that was eye-opening for them. The other thing that was eye-opening for them was the extrapolation. And what I mean by that is they could see, okay, so if you can build your own machines and if you can plant your biomass on farms and you can choose where those farms are, and all of that can be closer to where we're building, we can take cost out of the supply chain. We can take time out of the supply chain, right? We can have so much more flexibility and resilience in our long-term supply chain if you can scale this up, right? And so we went from being, oh, we're this climate thing, right? Like we're here to take carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it away in your walls, which they love, to something to a company that became a great product with a strategic supply chain. And that is really how we're able to drive important partnerships for us.
You use the word vertically integrate, which is something that I'm very passionate about. Going vertical in business rather than going horizontal. Um, I'm gonna take a step back 5 minutes. You mentioned tobacco farmers. Where did that idea come from? Because it seems like every step of your growth is again rooted in common sense.
Well, thank you for that. That's how we would look at it. And I think that it's hard for sometimes for investors, for VCs, institutional investors to assess us, because we don't fit into a box. They're like, wait, are you climate tech? We don't really, and it's like, well, of course we're climate tech, right? We're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere 10x faster than trees do it. Like, and we have build machines to, right. But it's like, but it's not pure. Like, but is that really climate tech? Are you like an ag tech? Are you an advanced manufacturer? It's like, yes, we're all of it because we are vertically integrating, not to try and fit into a box, but to solve a problem. Right. And that's fundamentally the approach of how we do think about this, is common sense. And really at the core, the common sense was, all right, look, I shouldn't even say common sense. This was just fundamental. Do we have a business or not? Like, we know that we have this mission to solve climate by pulling down atmospheric carbon and locking it away for a long time, and by turning it into like durable, useful products, right? We want to make money. This is not a science experiment or like a nonprofit selling a carbon credit. We want to make money. We know to do that in the grandest scale, to play in the biggest commodity markets, we're going to have to be unbelievably precise on costs and win on cost in a scaled up commoditized world. How do you do that? So we had to say, okay, let's analyze what's going to happen on the farm. Can we win on the farm in terms of cost? Yes, if we can get these yields, if we can harvest maybe 2 times in a season, if we can win on cost in the field. Can we win on supply chain? Yes, if we can build our factory close to where that farm is, and we know that the housing demand we're serving is also close to that factory, we can win on supply chain. And can we win in the factory? Yes, we believe that instead of building a $400 million factory with giant smokestacks, if we modularize the production, so that rather than having one 8-story press, literally 8 stories, like, maybe 1,000,000 pounds, to compress everything at once, if we have 50 lines where one line can be doing the OSB replacement, one line can be doing studs, one line can be doing cross-laminated timber for commercial buildings, all off the same core technology, we can win on cost and efficiency in the factory. And to us, that's common sense. Because if you can't do that, why even bother starting? Because you will fail, right? So that's how we just think about the business from the very beginning.
Let's take a step back because, I mean, you're throwing around terms like $2 million seed rounds and things like that. What's your background?
My background is, I would say, varied. I have an MBA. I got my start in business in China in the 1990s, not expecting to get a start in business in Nanjing, 1995. I actually went there to teach English, thinking that I would try and
Okay.
prepare myself, for a career in maybe foreign service, maybe CIA. But my interest kind of moved more in that sort of foreign policy direction. I was teaching and got a part-time job working in a bicycle lock factory for an American company called Kryptonite. This was 1995,
The lock
and
company?
it made bicycle locks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the lock company, right? So, 1 billion people riding bikes in China at the time, right? This developing country. And I thought, man, this feels like a really good opportunity. So I went to work full time for Kryptonite, became their business manager in China. We opened several factories, was trying to set up distribution in China. And, I just fell in love with the power of business and what it could do for, the people that we were working with, development. I realized that, one, not knowing a ton about business, it's hard to sell a bicycle lock that's more expensive than the bicycle. So that emerged as a challenge. And two, I saw a country transitioning to an automobile economy just insanely fast, right? Bridges, highways, tunnels going up. I mean, sort of overnight. And it just occurred to me, geez, there's a billion people riding bicycles here, but nobody wants a bicycle. Everybody wants a car. What's going to happen when that happens? I didn't know anything about global warming, or climate change, but that was my kind of um, sort of aha or epiphany of like, this is going to have profound implications. And eventually I came to think about it through the lens of climate change.
Okay. So you come back from China. What industries were you in? Or, I mean, did you stay out there until you, I mean, give me a little bit more.
So
There's a big gap there, Josh. Come
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. I came back to the States. I got my MBA from a school called Thunderbird,
Okay.
International Business School, and went back to Hong Kong, did some work, went to Europe, did some work for a company called Delphi Auto Systems. So it was General Motors auto parts supplier, had just spun off. I came back to the States, graduated in 2000 as the dot-com bubble was just actually happening. The bubble burst just as I was graduating, but I had already lined up a job to go work for a dot-com in Los Angeles. I just thought, man, I have to be part of this moment. So I went through a number of experiences that were useful, but through them all, I kept thinking like, geez, I've seen the future in China. I know that we are going to face these challenges of economic development brushing up against the limits of our ecological ecosystems to support it and sustain it. So what are we going to do about that? So eventually in 2004, so 7 years after I came home from China, I started my first company, which was called Vivavi, like live life, Viva V. With the idea that being in America, where we are a consumer culture, 66% or so of our economy is consumer spending, could I start a company, a retail company that curates and finds really cool, well designed, sustainably made products and help consumers start to transition their consumption in a more sustainable direction? And for most of my career, up until Planted, when Planted, because I'm describing to you with materials as more business to business, most of my career was on that same through line of thinking about how do you green consumption. Yeah, really looking at it of how do I put really great solutions in front of consumers. So that first was a company. I mean, through a random series of events, it became a radio show and reality TV show I hosted called The Lazy Environmentalist, where I would help lazy Americans go green. It was kind of happening right around that same time, 2008, 2009, 2010. The TV show came to an end in 2010. I went back into the startup world and eventually went to work for a company that Amazon had just acquired. The holding company was called Quidsy. Its biggest e-commerce website was diapers.com, which grew very fast.
Hmm.
And then there was soap.com, like a CVS, and wag.com, like a Petco, or, big pet store, and then Yo-Yo for toys. And I was brought in to build vine.com, which was like an online Whole Foods, big, natural, organic, sustainable products, kind of specialized e-commerce site. So I built that kind of within the Amazon empire slash ecosystem for a couple of years, and decided I really didn't like working in that sort of giant corporate environment. And I then moved down to Asheville, North Carolina, more for lifestyle reasons than anything else. My wife's from Nashville. My folks had retired to Asheville in the mountains, so we made the move. I spent a few years building Asheville's startup community. I got recruited by the Economic Development organization in the Chamber of Commerce to build Asheville's startup community. Asheville's a really hip, cool town in the mountains. And I just thought, man, no one's going to give me this job in LA or San Fran or, other places I've been. So jumped into that, eventually started my next furniture company and got to Planted.
Met the guy with the hemp in the garage. That's quite a story. And so it sounds like you were, obviously passionate about climate change and the environment and things like that. And you found the perfect business, but business is not perfect, right? Business is full of failure. People can listen to this and say, well, that's easy, Josh. You got lucky. You found a product, or you got lucky because you managed to raise $2 million. Walk us through the challenges, because it's not all, I mean, just because you get a seed round doesn't mean you can take the ball over the finish line. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can control things like inventory and orders and burn rate and expansion. What were the early days like?
I mean, of course, you're absolutely right. Someone once said to me, who I respect and who works in startups, is now an investor. And he said to me, he's like, the challenge with startups is the challenge, and the excitement about startups is that you constantly have your worst day and your best day in the same day, right? Like over and over and over again. And, for us, that early round, I mean, just we had a really good team. We had a really good story. We had a really bad deck. We didn't really know exactly what we were doing. I mean, to the point where, for sure, I probably talked to 70 investors before we got our first investor to say yes. And our first investor who said yes, made the difference, because eventually our first investor was Biz Stone, who was a co-founder of Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Put a lot of money into Beyond Meat, thinks on a civilizational scale, and he saw the civilizational ambition that we had. And, just a fantastic guy. But we had an early advisor who was a climate tech investor in San Francisco. And she said she wasn't going to invest in us, but we loved her feedback. We said, will you be an advisor? And she's like, I'll be an advisor. And here's my first piece of advice. Don't send anybody your deck, because your deck is absolutely terrible. This was me and Wada pitching the company. She's like, you two are great. Right? You two are great. Your energy is great. Your deck is awful. Only send investors the deck 10 minutes before the call, so they actually don't have time to look at it. And their first impression is you two. And that was really good advice. But all the way through, I mean, it's so challenging. It's challenging to build the right workforce. And I think we got really lucky in our geography. We moved 45 minutes north of Raleigh-Durham to a small town called Oxford. We actually moved into a former American Spirits cigarette factory, right? So there are some tobacco roots, because we are in tobacco country.
Yep.
And we tapped into production teams that are in that area that are extraordinary. Incredible workers, come from manufacturing backgrounds, can gung ho to jump in and build anything. Really have the right kind of startup mentality. Where we've struggled and evolved and have gotten stronger over time was tapping into that startup mentality amongst our engineers, right? Because this wasn't a West Coast Silicon Valley startup like we're in, a different part of the country and geography, where building the right culture to go fast and really try and be disruptive had challenges. Really had challenges, and I think we're in a much better place now. I really credit Nathan, our current CEO. Again, one of the SpaceXers who came east, is really instilling the culture and getting people to buy into it. When we raised a Series A funding round in 2022, the fall of 2022, a year later. We raised, I'm trying to think, how it's a $10+ million round. And gosh, just the pain of having people involved in that fundraise who you have to let go, the pain of having investors who say yes, but then on conditions that you can't possibly meet, and you didn't even know were conditions until you're looking at, maybe a piece of paper and you're like, wait a second, how do I?
Well, it's a stress. I can't even imagine.
It's just all that stress trying to get something over the finish line. And, at one point, I remember I talked to one of our very early investors, a VC who invests very early in companies. And I was calling up to get some advice and trying to close this Series A funding round now a year later. And he just started laughing. He was just like, I'm like, well, okay, so what do I do? I'm sure this situation has come up before. And he's just laughing. He's like, I've never heard of that situation. He's like, good luck. Let me know how it goes. I really hope you close the round. And so, yeah, you're just living with that all the time. And then finally, when we got to the point where we were ready to close the funding round, we had just like a few days by letter of the contract. It might not have ultimately mattered, but a few days by letter of the contract to get the funding round done. And it was over like Christmas weekend. And our attorneys are saying, well, Josh, do you think you can get this done? Because I needed I don't know, maybe 50 signatures of all of our early investors. Everybody had to sign these docs. And I was like, there's no way I can get this done. There's no way. I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can. And somehow we got it done, right? We just corralled all these, and that's not even running the business, right? That's just actually trying to get the money to actually run the business. I think the thing I would say about working with our team and these guys from SpaceX and the mentality they bring, there are certain things we have to do that probably would have just killed the business with other founders, maybe even including me. So I mentioned, for example, we have our own tissue culture lab. We probably will soon have the largest tissue culture lab in North Carolina. And tissue culture labs can be their own businesses. It's like it's an important, but it's like one aspect of a very large thing that we do. It is really hard to do, but not if you build rocket ships. And it's not by virtue of being a rocket ship engineer. It's by virtue of having already done something that's impossible. So nothing's impossible. Everything is, let's get it on a spreadsheet. Let's figure out the steps. Let's take the action items, check one off at a time. We'll get through it. Let's build it. Right. And that's really pretty remarkable to see in action.
You mentioned you've got some SpaceXers with you. I think everybody by now knows about Elon's, sort of Hail Mary pass out there, right? I mean, one launch away from complete bankruptcy and destruction. Do you take any, I mean, love him or hate him, right? But do you take any motivation from that when in their darkest hour and you're trying to raise money or funds or things like that?
I'm I would say if you ask different people on the team, for sure, you're going to hear different motivations. I think for me, the view has been the world needs this innovation. This innovation has to happen. This innovation is going to happen. Just take the next step, right? That's how it's been for me. But I would think that if you were to ask, again, Nathan or Wada, you'd probably get a different response.
Let's go back to the product itself. Okay, so you said OSB, Oriented Strand Board, is one of your biggest product competitors. What is the product called itself? Because I know Planted is the company. What did you name the product?
Yeah, that's a very timely question. For now, we just call it it's our Planted structural panel. It's something where we're working on
planted structural
it's planted structural panels. It's really like this view of it is what it is, and we're going through some naming process.
Branding is everything, though, right? I mean, you're in marketing, so.
Well, yeah, and so that's also one reason why I didn't want to have a name like. I mean, gosh, I don't know. I mean, if you know the name,
your acronym, right?
Well, or the names in this industry are, tend to be these like superlatives. A lot of like hyperbole. These names like
right.
Top Wall, right? Like I didn't want to have something that we were going to brand that didn't have Planted in the name because I don't want to brand two things, right? Yeah. I don't like. It's like Tesla Model Y, right? It's not like Dodge Durango, and it's like, oh, should I get a Durango or should I get a Dodge? It's like, no, you're getting a Tesla. You're getting the Model Y Tesla, right? Yeah. And for us, we are the innovation. Planted is the core innovation. And I don't have the budget or even the interest in trying to get a builder to think about, like, I'll give you an example. One of the products that eventually we're going to compete with is a company called Zip, which is, it's a cool wall system that Zip sheathing has, oriented strand board with a layer on it that keeps moisture out, right? It's a premium product, but nobody knows who makes Zip. It's a company called Huber Engineered Woods, right? But like, to me, we're the disruptor. I don't want just people to think like, oh, there's this product out there called like, I don't know, Awesome Sauce. But they never hear of Planted. I want them to think like, I want to build with Planted. Right. So like we'll probably do something like the first product is Planted 1. That's the board. The second product is Planted 2. That's the stud. Right. Like,
it makes sense. You don't want to just be known for one product. And then Pepsi, Coke, those aren't real words. It takes billions of dollars for brand awareness. And so you have to choose wisely.
The other thing is, we know what the conventions are in the industry. We know that the convention is to do something like, oh, we're going to call it Zip, or we're going to call it some, fancy name. And then there's but it's not related to the company name. Like, we know that's the convention. So if we choose to do something different, Planted 1, Planted 2, Planted, whatever, like we know we're doing it as a disruptor in the industry,
Hmm.
that we are intentionally defying a convention to stand out for our innovation, right? It's all connected to the brand, and the brand is really at its core. It certainly is about common sense, but we think it's common sense in an industry that in many respects, I mean, we know why the choices get made, but look, OSB is like the least worst thing you can build with that passes code. That's why
Yeah.
that's right. It's the cheapest thing. It's the least worst. We don't think that's a particularly great way to build housing. So we're going to do it differently, and we're going to try and disrupt a system that we don't really believe in.
However, though, I will challenge you in saying that there's probably millions, if not billions, of products that were born and died probably the same day that were better than the competitors on the market. Sometimes it doesn't matter that you have a better product. It's having people know about it, right? And so my follow up question, Josh, is, I mean, is it commercially available yet in retail, or is that sort of in the future?
Commercial retail is I would say it's certainly in the future. I mentioned that we have this relationship with DR Horton.
Hmm.
Uh, we are now, contracted to deliver a vast amount of panels, right? So we have uh, demand that is going to take us pretty far into the future. So that's not to say that we're not going to work with other customers too, because we are. But what it is to say is that we are fortunate to have DR Horton is an amazing partner for us on so many levels. But it's also a partner that helps us really drive validation of our product in market, right? So like as we start delivering to DR Horton, and as the biggest builder is saying, yeah, this product is like we built with this product, it's a huge signal. So even if we wanted to go into retail today, you'd put a product on the shelf that, would people necessarily trust that they want to build with it? They wouldn't know. Do you know what I
Yeah, and then
mean?
of course you have shelf space, all those traditional retail things. Do I get it on an end cap? It's shelf space. I have to get my buyers to endorse it. Like there's all of these things, right? It's very difficult.
It's very difficult. And for a startup, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get, well, maybe for any company, but the way that we would think about it is you're trying to get, maximum ROI, maximum revenue, maximum scale with the least amount of complication in a very complicated, supply chain business that we're in, right? As we said, we're vertically integrated. So what is the path that simplifies the path to market with the greatest opportunity? And that's what we're going after. And we've been really fortunate. Like I said, DR Horton's amazing. We're at the International Builder Show this week, actually showcasing a product that we're developing with Ox Engineered Woods, another really big scaled up provider who's coming in as a collaborator. We're going to announce some other really big partnerships. And I guess the other thing I would say, when I started to really understand the home building market, I see it through kind of three different types of home builders. You have your core green builders, your core sustainable builders. They're awesome. I know a lot of them. Asheville, North Carolina is a kind of a central hub for many of them. So I had a lot of builders to go to say, does this have resonance?
Hmm.
While for most of them it had resonance, not all, but for most, it had no scale, right? You have a builder who's doing maybe what, 20, 25, 50, maybe 150 homes, but unlikely in a year, right? So you have to do the kind of hand-to-hand combat going to market, like you said, knowing your distributor, having supply, right? Having that relationship, showing up on sales calls with your distributor, going to job sites, trying to make sure everyone's happy. And like that's
Hmm.
path that's very difficult. Then you have this massive middle where most of the home builders are, thousands of home builders who really don't care at all about sustainability. They care about delivering the whatever quality they're trying to hit in market at the best possible price for the quality they're offering, right?
And
However, they're
speed.
and speed, and that's it. And then you have at the top, you have the public builders, you have the publicly traded builders, the large builders, and by virtue of being public, Not all of them, but many of them are more attuned to sustainability, right? Because that's part of the conversation when you're in the public markets. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to act on that in terms of how they engage with us, but some of them have been more open to that conversation, at least for us to get in the door. But that's also where you can just drive massive volume if you can make the relationship work. Now, we got, like I said, very fortunate to have the biggest builder in the country, who we think is the most forward-looking, visionary company in D.R. Horton, that we get to work with. But you kind of have to pick your lane there. And either we were going to go small with green builders and a lot of hand-to-hand combat and a lot of cost and difficult to scale, a middle that really doesn't care at all about our value prop, or the top end where there's awareness of the conversation around sustainability, some alignment there. But if you can deliver for them, then you can open up tons and tons of volume and go a lot faster.
The marketing discussion that we're having right now, I think fascinates me the most because basically you have to almost become a branding company. And to me, I see there's two paths, partnering with D.R. Horton, because on one hand, after a certain period of time, if you guys decide to go retail, if you guys decide to go commercial retail, you can say our panels have been, used in 10,000 houses, 5,000 houses, 2,000 houses, which is great. On the other side, though, you now have your unicorn that you're working with. You're scaling everything up. And so I'll call it out. What happens if something happens with that partnership, right? What do you do? Because that's the other part. You have one core client that's driving all of your revenue, which of course in any business is dangerous.
Yeah, that's of course something we've thought about as well. I would say what's been instrumental in building the trust both ways in this relationship with D.R. Horton, and with recognizing that we are a small startup and D.R. Horton is the biggest builder in America, is along the way having proof points, trust points, things we do together where we align as, really as people. I mean, just time we spend together, but also milestones that we check together. One of the things we did, I want to say back in 2023, we installed our panels. We got through certification. That was a big milestone to be able to say this is going home. And then we built a roof together for a D.R. Horton home in Durham, North Carolina. So installation, everyone got comfort. How does this install? Is it really the same as installing OSB? Yes. Okay. It's the same thing. It shows up the same, installs the same. Nobody on the job site knows the difference. And then more proof points beyond that, so that the trust goes both ways, right? Where we know we're putting a lot of eggs in their basket, and they know, that they're investing a lot of time and resources with us. Because there's high confidence in where the relationship is going together. So, there's always, of course, some risk, but we feel, fantastic about how we've gotten to this point with this company.
I don't know whether it's just my podcast or the flavor of this last week, but I've had several guests on who are in the VC space. One of them, I just released that a few days ago. And, he was running sort of a meeting group and, has raised something like $100 million for the group. He spoke about that the magic formula in any business, but particularly when you're dealing with new startups and founders and seed capital and things like that, is really about relationships. Can you speak about that here? Because, you're saying all of those buzzwords. I think relationships are 70, 80, even not 90% of your success and regular business success.
I would say it personally. I would certainly say it for Planted. I think that, look, I was the founding CEO of Planted with these two SpaceXers. We ran the company together for 3 years, and then I stepped down as CEO in 2024. And I think we all came to a decision that for the timing and the type of company, that it really made sense ultimately now for Nathan, one of the SpaceXers, to step in as CEO. To talk about it plainly, that wasn't an easy conversation for me to have, or an easy realization to come to. But I think it was the best thing for the company. You fast forward 2 years later, and our relationships have remained strong. I think over the last year, while I wasn't part of the company, we just started reconnecting again, talking about some things related to the business. I'm still, have a, for me, a very important stake in the company. And it got to a point where, those guys felt it would be helpful for my skill sets to come back in as the marketer, brander, storyteller, help with business development, sales, et cetera. And that opportunity, it's rare, right? That a founding CEO comes back in as anything, and is willing to come back in as a CMO. It doesn't have to be the CEO. I don't care about the title, but I'm excited about the work, and I'm excited to be back there because I have such respect for these guys, but it's the relationship that enables us to say, well, whatever, the roles were this, now they're X, who cares? The mission's so big, but we are, despite a lot of stress, and this is just startup stress, right? Founder stress. Everybody has it. Teams have it. The relationships have, stayed intact and remained strong enough for me to come in, them to have confidence to bring me back, me to want to come back, and for us to be looking at a future that we're all still just so excited about.
Well, I think I think most successful entrepreneurs are not doing it for the money. It's for the bigger purpose, the legacy, the mark that you're leaving on the planet in your case. But to your credit, Josh, I mean, just keeping the ego at the door, right? Realizing and doing some soul searching when people are giving you that feedback. Okay, we don't want you to be the CEO. We need to, make a replacement for the good of the company. Looking at yourself and saying, yeah, you know what? I can, whatever, right? Fill in the blank. But then coming back, I think it's a great story, and kudos to you for sticking with it. I don't think a lot of people would have done that.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. And like I said, I mean, I know I've said it a few times, but you think your story's so unique. It's not, like this is all startups go through this. You're just at the intensity, the pressure, right? It's all so intense. But I think that I don't know if I would have made this decision if I were 25, right? But a little bit later on in my career, having been around the block a few times, it's like, you hold on to the things that matter, and you try and kind of let the things that don't sort of wash off a little bit. And
right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's been amazing. I have one final question for you because I ask every guest this. My audience knows this. So Josh, this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
Oh boy. Yeah. I define success by being able to wake up every day, work on problems and products that I think are important to the world. Certainly be compensated well for that. That's what success looks like to me. What was the other part of that question?
What does winning look like for you?
Winning. Winning right now probably means something different to me. It means more than just, what's happening with my company. Winning means, how am I showing up with my family? How am I showing up for my kids? How am I showing up for my wife? How am I showing up as a human and a man, every day, despite the challenges, and celebrate the good times. And, this is an evolution for me to also, as someone who tends to be a workaholic and so wrapped up in the work, to just, to try to win in more aspects of my life. I feel like that's, winning is a more holistic, approach to life for me today than it probably, again, was earlier in my career.
Great answer. Well, again, thanks for coming on the podcast. I know you have a podcast, a very well-known podcast, so I'll put all of that into our show notes, and we can cross-pollinate our audiences. So thanks again.
Thank you, Garrett. Really appreciate it.
Okay, take care.